Hello and most welcome to 1728 of the series. We will today continue the read of Daniel D. Hutto, where it was ended. Let's see here in a second. At 1724. We are currently on page 6. We mentioned here that not all made concepts are alike, not even by a long shot. We need a terrain of concepts in the life world is rough, uncharted, and different. Concepts all have different values. Some are better, some are better, some are worse. There is no objective scale. You need to do your own, very own, private exploration of everything. And one could say, being stranded in the captivity of picture will lead you to invent your own fictitious concepts. Yes, we know that's an impossibility, but call it living in a sort of frantic fantasy. It's unhealthy. It could also be devastating for a person's life. We need useful concepts, but we can't really make do with unuseful ones. I would call this the terra incognita of knowledge and understanding. Especially when I think my personal approach to this is that we left knowledge even more today. Modernization has left a lot of knowledge inaccessible or deemed to be unuseful or antiquated. There used to be higher access to knowing before, and now it's been outcasted, shunned even. As being part of the hidden beyondness or underneath. Leaves little, if any, room for understanding, reachability. continue the read. It's the third paragraph on page 6. Thus, the language games are rather set up as objects of comparison, which are meant to throw light on the facts of our language by way not only of similarities but also of dissimilarity. This is all one can do when traversing the rough and open terrain that makes up the landscape of concepts. This is why in 1948 Wittgenstein writes, "Nothing is more important for teaching us to understand the concepts we have than constructing fictitious ones." He makes this point in Settle in his discussion of a quite unusual language game that might have surrounded the concept of pain. He conjures up a tribe that employs two different concepts of pain. One is applied where there is visible damage and is linked with tending, pity, and so on. The other is used for stomach ache, for example, and is tied up with mockery of anyone who complains. Accordingly, unless members of this tribe can locate some kind of outer bodily damage, they will not regard the person as experiencing what we would call pain. Their notion of what counts as pain cuts much more finely than would ours. Or as Wittgenstein puts it, they have concepts which cut across ours. He says of them that their more public understanding of pain is different but related to ours. Hence, to imagine it, we would need to imagine many other connections differently. Yet, this in turn requires that we imagine many other facts to be different. Not everything, of course, but quite a lot. For example, an indefinite number of other psychological facts and related practices would have to be otherwise if the analogy were to hold in just the way stated. Although we cannot conceive of an exact list of which changes would be necessary, this can be seen straight away if we only consider that in making such a list we could either start on the one hand by imagining our reactions to pain to be quite different from, on the other, by imagining our reactions to other phenomena, such as warmth, as being quite different. Move in either of these directions would also have the ripple effect of making a great number of other connections and associations. And activities, live or die. To make such shifts, an entirely different range of analogies would become appropriate or cease to be so. It is not possible to chart all such changes which is why Wittgenstein only ever asks us to imagine localized language game in restricted contexts. Although it seems we can do this at a stretch, given the differences in our practices. It is only ever an exercise in imagination. To make genuine sense of these activities would require the full picture, a complete sketch of this other form of life. This is beyond us. Nor are we asked, nor are we not being asked to seriously imagine per impossible, an alien form of life. Rather, the imagined scenario is being used as a device to get us to reflect on the complexity of our own practice by way of comparison. And to recognize that it characterizes an aspect of our form of life. In this way, imagining language games aids in the removal of the false pictures we may have developed about, say, the essential pain or thought. Getting us to picture alternative language games serves as a dialectical tool. It is with this end in mind, shorn of theoretical and explanatory ambitions, that Wittgenstein directs us to let the use of words teach you their meaning. The point is that, crucially, one cannot guess how a word functions. One has to look at its use and learn from that. It is against this backdrop that we should understand Wittgenstein's famous remark that for a large class of cases, though not for all, in which we employ the word meaning. It can be employed thus: the meaning of a word is its use in language. We must be very careful in understanding what it is that Wittgenstein is trying to get us to attend to and describe in such cases. In advocating description instead of explanation, Wittgenstein is in no way suggesting that descriptions are simply an alternative means of getting at the same target of concern to philosophical theorists. Rather, he asks us to rethink the very nature and purposes of philosophical enterprise. Understood in this light, it would be wrong to think Wittgenstein was seeking to identify general criteria by which to provide complete descriptions of psychological phenomena. Rather, his philosophical investigations should be understood as pursuing the aim of getting a clear view of something we know when no one asks us. But no longer know when we are supposed to give an account of it. For it is only this that is something we need to remind ourselves of. In saying this, Wittgenstein is not advocating a single method of clarification or striving after completeness or comprehensiveness. In sum, to understand Wittgenstein's general philosophical approach is to recognize that our linguo-conceptual practices and the basis of a priori commitments associated with them are extremely messy. For the most part, these practices evolve not for the sake of helping us to understand the world, but to serve a variety of more humdrum practical purposes, and to serve them in a way that conduces to the complex contingencies of our nature. Our culture and our environment. So we should not be surprised to find, as we do find, that it is no easy matter to provide examples of ordinary notions governed by simple commitments. For these reasons, in general, our concepts, and especially our psychological concepts, are ineradicably messy. Their usage isn't nicely systemizable. Wittgenstein enjoins us not to attempt to impose an artificial order on our concepts, but to realize that what is rigid should be left rigid. After all, it is not to be expected of this world that it should have a unified employment. We should rather expect the opposite. If we don't think but look, we find that one learns the word think, that is, its use, under certain circumstances, which, however, one does not learn to describe. Wittgenstein explicitly tells us of his efforts to explore the possible uses of psychological concepts that is not of importance to me, because I'm keen of completeness. Rather, because each one casts light on the correct treatment of all. To highlight the point, he considers what success in such an endeavor might look like. A detailed account of all the possible circumstances in which it would be appropriate to use the concept think. In describing the possible use of psychological concepts, Wittgenstein is offering up reminders that do not add substantively to knowledge of the world. They do tell his audience anything new. His purpose is clear: not to advance hypotheses with which someone not under the sway of a picture might disagree. Or which might be proved true through some kind of empirical test. His descriptions are at best elucidations that could be used to help us see something that is right before our eyes, yet blocked from view. Although this aids in getting clear about various subject matters, there are no general rules for the use of psychological concepts that can be articulated. Thus, Wittgenstein's descriptions always take the form of case-by-case examples. What he seeks to describe is not a comprehensive set of rules for the use of concepts, but reminders of how we might possibly use our concepts again. The point of providing these reminders is not to provide new factual information or to provide better theory of some objective phenomenon that can be studied independently of understanding the possibilities inherent in our form of life. For these reasons, in conducing his philosophical investigations, Wittgenstein is neither doing natural science nor yet natural history. But equally, since he is not trying to divine an a priori set of general rules for the use of concepts, he isn't doing traditional metaphysics. Indeed, by his lights, the essential thing about metaphysics is that it problematically obliterates the distinction between factual and conceptual investigations. Namely, a metaphysical attempt to divine the essence of things is an attempt to discover a set of explanatory superfacts that fix all other facts. Getting clear about these aspects of his project is vital if we are to understand how he understands the ultimate target of his grammatical investigations to be conceptual. Certainly, he is not pursuing a program of ordinary language philosophy. Rather, he rejects the possibility that we might have privileged access to a neutral independent metaphysical reality in favor of the acknowledgement that we can do no better than to note how we use our psychological concepts and explore different possible uses of those concepts through imaginary exercise. It is with this in mind that he tells us we are not analyzing a phenomenon that is a thought, but a concept, that of thinking. Therefore, the use of the word. Such comparison can help to break the temptation to try to observe hidden or underlying processes that go on when we are thinking. By exploring how we might use our concept of thinking, we get beyond the misleading idea that we will somehow divine the essence of thinking by discovering new facts about a special mental process that the word thinking names. In getting us to give up the idea that there is some yet to be discovered state or process that the term thinking denotes. Wittgenstein is also redirecting us toward what should be of interest to us when we wish to investigate investigate the nature of our psychology. We forget that what should interest us is the question, how do we compare these experiences? What criterion of identity do we fix for their occurrence? Thus he bids us look on the language game as the primary thing. For all these reasons, and Wittgenstein contrasts exploring our language games descriptively with the advancing of explanatory ambitions as corrupting and dangerous. they can mesmerize us and drive us to systematically misrepresent our practices. Hence, it often happens that we only become aware of the important facts if we suppress the question, why? Knowing how we can go wrong in seeking general explanations of psychological phenomena, he warns us against a main cause of philosophical disease, a one-sided diet. One nourishes one's thinking with only one kind of example. Deep-seated philosophical errors begin to take root in the fertile soil of questing after philosophical explanations that we feel compelled to supply. For focusing too much on just one aspect of a phenomenon can lead us to elevate it to the status of the essential feature. Thus, when other equally prominent features are noticed, they threaten to occupy this position, serving as counter-examples, or at the very least, they require some other accommodation. Through philosophical theorizing, one is led to intractable questions, contradictions that in turn spur the production of further attempts at revised theory and improved explanation. One is thus quickly drawn into an elaborate web of theorizing, often without any clear means of evaluating the various proposals in play. But this process only obscures and takes us away from what we wanted to understand in the first place, and takes us further and further away from genuine resolutions. Attention to what is possible for us to say and do is the only way to break free of the spell cast by a misleading picture and the theoretical commitments and misguided explanatory agenda it inspires. To get entirely free of a misleading picture requires not just removing the source of our puzzlement, but being reminded by means of examples of the conditions for the possible use of our concepts. Scientisms and the dangers of philosophical theorizing. Well, I say thank you very much for 1728. Have a wonderful morning, day, afternoon. Bye bye.